He survived World War II. He built a fortune from nothing. He raised a family, buried the wife of his youth, and still found the courage to open his heart one more time. Stephen Beard had done everything right. He had a mansion in one of Austin's wealthiest neighborhoods, a lake house, a television empire, a younger wife who told him he made her feel safe, and twin daughters he had adopted as his own. From the outside, his life in the late 1990s looked like a reward, the kind of second chapter that widowers dream about. But on October 2nd, 1999, at 3 o'clock in the morning, a woman slipped through the unlocked doors of that mansion, walked down the hallway in the dark, and shot Stephen Beard in the stomach with a shotgun while he slept. Stephen woke screaming. He reached for the phone and dialed 911 himself. And the words he said to that dispatcher have never been forgotten by anyone who heard them. "Hurry, my guts just came out of my stomach." What makes this case so much darker than a simple murder story is this. The woman who pulled that trigger did not do it for money. She did it because she believed she was in love, and because prosecutors said someone had used that love, very deliberately, as a weapon. This is the story of Stephen Beard, and it begins long before the crime. Unreal True Crime launches its new book, Unreal True Crime, Latin edition. 35 shocking true murder cases from across Latin America. Buy it now on Amazon. Stephen Franklin Beard was born on November 27, 1924, in Texas. He did not inherit his wealth. He built it from the ground up through decades of work, salesmanship, and an instinct for American broadcasting. He came of age during World War II, served in the Navy, trained as a pilot and engineer, and returned home like millions of veterans with nothing but ambition. His first civilian job was selling shoes at Neiman Marcus in Dallas. Not glamorous, but it was there that he met a young model named Elise Adams. They fell in love and married. Stephen moved into radio and advertising, working at KRLD in Dallas, then at the Tracy Locke Advertising Agency, then at John Blair and Company, a national firm selling advertising time for radio and television stations. By the early 1960s, he was a vice president. He was building a career, a reputation, and a family. He and Elise had 3 children, Stephen III, Becky, and Paul. People who knew him described him the same way, over and over. Super funny, super generous, a teddy bear, a man who remembered where he came from and never forgot that the good times were not guaranteed. His biggest professional achievement came in the early 1980s when he became co-owner and general manager of KBVO-TV, Channel 42 in Austin, a station that would eventually become KEY-ETV. Stephen Beard became an Austin institution. His net worth was estimated between $7 and $12 million. He belonged to the Austin Country Club. He was careful with money the way people who once had very little tend to be. And he had been married to Elise for more than 40 years. When Elise became ill with cancer, Stephen stayed by her side. He took her to doctors, reorganized his life around her care. She died in October 1993. After her death, friends noticed a change. The big personality was still there, but something underneath had shifted. He had never truly been alone as an adult, and now, for the first time, his home felt very large and very quiet. He began spending evenings at the Austin Country Club, often sitting by himself. That is where he met Celeste Johnson. Celeste Johnson was born on February 13, 1963, in Ventura County, California. One of 4 adopted children. Her early life, by most accounts, was unstable. She later claimed a childhood marked by trauma and abuse. Those claims were never proven in court, but they became a central part of the image she presented to the world, a damaged woman who needed someone to rescue her. At 17, Celeste became pregnant and married a teenager named Craig Bratcher. She gave birth to twin daughters, Christina and Jennifer. The marriage was turbulent, involving allegations of abuse and restraining orders, and ended in divorce in 1983. Over the following decade, she married twice more, was convicted of insurance fraud after burning a car she had reported stolen, and served roughly 3 months in jail. By the time Celeste arrived in Austin in the early 1990s, she had been married 3 times, had a criminal record, and was working as a waitress at the Austin Country Club. Christina was living with her. Jennifer was with her father in Washington State. Then one evening, Stephen Beard sat down at a table she was serving. Stephen was immediately taken with her. She was warm when warmth was useful, vulnerable when vulnerability served a purpose. Stephen, still grieving and adjusting to his silence, was exactly the kind of man who responded to that. By February 1995, Stephen Beard, 70 years old, a self-made millionaire, married Celeste Johnson, 32, a 3 times divorced waitress with a complicated past. Friends were concerned. His children had reservations. But Stephen was in love. He financed her custody battle to bring Jennifer back from Washington. He helped raise both girls. Eventually, after their biological father died, he adopted Christina and Jennifer and gave them his name. He did not see what prosecutors would later argue was obvious, that for Celeste, Stephen Beard was not a husband, he was a solution. Before the wedding, Stephen and Celeste signed a marital agreement. Stephen would give Celeste $1 million during the marriage. If they divorced, she would receive $500,000. In 1997, he transferred $500,000 into a trust for her. The trustee later testified it was gone within 6 months. The spending was a constant source of conflict. Celeste later acknowledged the couple's monthly budget was $35,000, and that she spent much more. The marriage began to fracture. Stephen filed for divorce at one point, though they reconciled. What was happening behind closed doors, according to the people who lived inside those doors, was something else entirely. Christina and Jennifer later testified that Celeste used derogatory names for Stephen and told them openly she had married him for money. They said she substituted Everclear, near-pure grain alcohol, for vodka in his drinks, that she mixed sleeping pills into his food and sometimes gave him pills instead of his regular medication. They described something Celeste allegedly called a graveyard drink, cocktails given before dinner that would make Stephen violently intoxicated, causing him to eat and pass out. The daughters said they heard her use that word more than once. Through all of it, Celeste continued to present herself to Stephen and to the world as a devoted wife. In early 1999, Celeste entered St. David's Pavilion, a psychiatric hospital in Austin, being treated for depression. There she met Tracy Tarleton, a fellow patient being treated for bipolar disorder. Emotionally vulnerable and, by her own later testimony, deeply in love with Celeste almost immediately. What followed, according to Tracy's testimony, was a romantic relationship. After both were discharged, they continued seeing each other. In motel rooms, at social events, at the Beard Lake House. Bookstore employees who knew Tracy said they saw Celeste visiting her at work. At a party at the lake house in July 1999, Celeste was photographed sitting on Tracy's lap. Witnesses said they saw the two women kissing and holding hands. Christina and her boyfriend later found them together in bed. Celeste denied all of it. Her defense would argue Tracy was delusional, an obsessed woman who had imagined a relationship that did not exist. Tracy's version was very different. She testified that Celeste painted Stephen as a monster, controlling, abusive, psychologically destroying her. She said she married him only to secure custody of her daughters and now felt completely trapped. Tracy believed it. She also testified to more disturbing details. That Celeste had described replacing Stephen's vodka with Everclear, placing a plastic bag over his head in an unsuccessful attempt to suffocate him, and even attempting to poison him using botulin from a recipe book. These were allegations through testimony, not separate convictions, but they formed the prosecution's portrait of a woman who had been trying to end her husband's life for months. Between August 29th and October 1st, 1999, there were 98 phone calls, totaling 336 minutes, between phones used by Celeste and phones used by Tracy. 8 calls happened on the day of the shooting itself. In late September 1999, Stephen and Celeste were scheduled to leave for Europe. Tracy testified that Celeste said she could not go, that she might kill herself if forced to take that trip, that there was only one way out. Tracy testified that Celeste asked her to shoot Stephen Beard the evening before the shooting read, in hindsight, like a carefully executed checklist. Celeste suggested, for the first time without being asked, that Jennifer and her friends spend the weekend at the lake house. Jennifer accepted. It was unusual. Celeste had never previously allowed Jennifer to use the lake house without permission. Stephen's elderly dog Megan had slept in his bedroom for years. That night, Celeste brought Megan to the lake house, telling the teenagers that Stephen had been drunk and hit her. Everyone who knew Stephen found that strange. He adored Megan. Christina's boyfriend, Justin, often spent the night at the house with Celeste's permission. That night she told him he could not stay. He left around midnight. By the early morning hours of October 2nd, the mansion had been quietly emptied of witnesses. Jennifer was at the lake house. The dog was at the lake house. Christina's boyfriend was gone. The only people inside were Stephen, Celeste, and Christina, in separate bedrooms. Tracy later testified that Celeste had told her the house would be unlocked, the security system off. She had shown her where to park, how to enter, which room Stephen would be in. And she had told her, if Stephen does not die immediately, wait for him to bleed to death before calling the police. At approximately 3 a.m., Tracy Tarleton walked through the unlocked doors of the Beard Mansion, moved through the dark house, and entered Stephen's bedroom. He was asleep. She raised the shotgun and fired. The blast hit him in the abdomen. He jolted awake. He reached for the phone and dialed 911. The spent shell fell near the bed. First responders found Stephen alive, holding his side. The scene initially appeared to be a catastrophic medical emergency. Then investigators found the shell. Drawers had been pulled open, clothing disturbed. But most valuables had not been taken. The gate was open, the doors were unlocked. No security system had been active. Tracy had not disposed of her gun. She owned it legally, it was personalized, and she testified later that she had expected Celeste to collect the spent shell before anyone arrived. The shell was still there when police walked in. Within hours, police spoke to Christina, Jennifer, and their boyfriends. When asked if they knew anyone who might have hurt Stephen, they immediately gave a name: Tracy Tarleton. That same day, Celeste allegedly told them not to mention Tracy to the police. She also revoked consent to search the Beard house. The next day, investigators arrived at the hospital to find a sign outside Stephen's room: no visitors, including police, unless Celeste was present. She had placed herself between law enforcement and the only conscious witness to the aftermath. Police located Tracy that same day, interviewed her, and took her shotgun. 6 days later, on October 8, 1999, ballistics confirmed the shell found in Stephen's bedroom had been fired from Tracy Tarleton's gun. She was arrested that day, charged with injury to an elderly individual. She said nothing about Celeste. Stephen remained hospitalized for months. Intensive care, then a regular room, then rehabilitation. He was discharged home with Celeste on January 18, 2000. The next day, Celeste called his doctor and demanded he be readmitted. Stephen's condition deteriorated rapidly. On January 22, 2000, Stephen Franklin Beard died. He was 75 years old. The cause of death: pulmonary embolism and bronchopneumonia with sepsis. Direct complications of the shotgun wound he had survived for over 3 months. Tracy's charge was upgraded to capital murder. And eventually, Tracy began to talk. While investigators built their case, Christina had been secretly recording conversations with Celeste. Those recordings, ruled authentic and admissible, contained statements used at trial, including one in which Celeste could allegedly be heard indicating she had hired someone to kill Tracy. A personal assistant named Donna Goodson later testified that Celeste had paid her to find a hitman, showed her Tracy's house and car, and made payments totaling more than $12,000. Celeste had first tried to protect Tracy, and then tried to eliminate her. One more detail sealed Celeste's image in the minds of anyone watching the case. Witnesses testified that on the day of Stephen's funeral, Celeste laughed and joked in the limousine on the way to the service, then began to weep when they arrived. After the funeral, she was reportedly cheerful again. When the limo stopped at a shopping center Stephen had owned, she allegedly told employees there that she was now the owner and that they could kiss her ass the way they had kissed Steve's. Tracy Tarleton eventually pleaded guilty to murder and agreed to testify against Celeste in exchange for a 20-year sentence. Celeste Beard Johnson went on trial in 2003. The prosecution's case rested on Texas's law of parties. A person can be convicted of a crime even without personally committing it if they solicited, encouraged, directed, aided, or attempted to aid another person in carrying it out. The state presented the phone records, the financial evidence, the depleted trust, the $700,000 in expenses accumulated in the 4 months after the shooting, the gap between what Celeste would receive in divorce versus what she would inherit under Stephen's will, the daughter's testimony, the recordings, Donna Goodson's account, Tracy's detailed testimony about the unlocked doors, the dog removed from the house, the sleeping boyfriend sent away, the suggested method of shooting. Celeste's daughters, the women Stephen had adopted, the women who had grown up inside that marriage, took the stand against their own mother. Jennifer said she did it for justice, for Stephen. Christina described watching her mother manipulate a man who had given their family everything. The defense argued Tracy was delusional and obsessed, acting alone, that the daughters had financial motivations. The jury did not agree. Celeste Beard Johnson was convicted of capital murder and injury to an elderly individual. She received life imprisonment. In 2006, the Texas Court of Appeals affirmed both convictions. She is currently incarcerated at the Dr. Lane Murray Unit in Gatesville, Texas, with a parole eligibility date of April 1, 2042. She maintains her innocence to this day. Technical and legal analysis. The Stephen Beard case is a landmark example of conviction under the law of parties. And what makes it legally significant is just how carefully the state constructed its corroboration. In Texas, accomplice testimony alone cannot support a conviction. It must be independently corroborated. The prosecution delivered that corroboration from multiple directions simultaneously. Phone records showing 98 calls in the month before the shooting. The systematic removal of witnesses the night before. The unlocked doors and deactivated security. Celeste's immediate attempt to prevent investigators from speaking to witnesses. The secret cell phone. The alleged murder for hire payments. And the daughter's recordings. The financial motive argument was also structurally tight. Under the marital agreement, divorce would give Celeste $500,000. Under Stephen's will, his death gave her the residence, the lake house, and half of his remaining assets, a substantially larger outcome. Stephen's own attorney testified to this gap. The prosecution framed the entire conspiracy around it. Not a crime of passion, but a calculated financial decision. The defense's medical causation challenge, that Stephen died from a septic infection unrelated to the wound, was rejected by both the jury and the appellate court, which found the state's expert testimony sufficient to establish the gunshot wound as the originating cause of every complication that followed. What this case demonstrates is that manipulation-based murder prosecutions succeed when the state can prove not just what happened, but why every surrounding decision was made. The dog, the daughter sent to the lake house, the boyfriend turned away. Each one alone proves nothing. Together, they build a picture of a night that was carefully designed. Psychological analysis. To understand this case psychologically, the key is not what Celeste allegedly did, but how she allegedly did it. The prosecution's theory was not rage or impulse. It was sustained, calculated manipulation. Specifically, the construction of false victimhood. To Tracy Tarleton, Celeste presented herself as trapped, abused, and suicidal. A woman so helpless that only someone else could save her. This is a pattern that researchers in coercive control recognize clearly. The manipulator positions themselves as the victim, converting another person's empathy into a tool of action. Tracy was an ideal target. She was in psychiatric treatment, emotionally vulnerable, and, by her own account, deeply in love with Celeste. She did not believe she was being used as a weapon. She believed she was rescuing someone she loved. That is one of the most disturbing elements of this case. Tracy's legal culpability is real and established. Yet, psychologically, she was also, in a meaningful sense, a victim. The manipulation extended in every direction. Stephen was allegedly kept physically weakened through drugged food and alcohol. The daughters were conditioned to normalize instability and expect silence. Investigators were blocked from direct access. Witnesses were coached on what not to say. What emerges is a portrait of someone who used emotional relationships, romantic love, parental loyalty, marital trust, not as genuine connections but as leverage, not through personal violence, but through the emotional control she held over the people around her. Whether any clinical diagnosis applies here is not for a court or a YouTube channel to determine, but the pattern described consistently by multiple independent witnesses across years of testimony reflects something that true crime cases involving manipulation-based murder have documented repeatedly. The most dangerous person in the room is not always the one holding the weapon. That is the story of Stephen and Celeste Beard, one of the most psychologically layered murder cases in Texas history. If this case stayed with you, share it. And if you're new here, subscribe. We cover the real cases, the full stories, the ones that do not let you look away. New video every week. See you in the next one.